My name is Cheryl Pemberton. I'm with the Mid-Continent Public Library. I want to take a moment to introduce you to tonight's presenter, Andrea Lee, PhD, is an artist, art historian, and arts educator who has worked in the field of visual arts for over 30 years. Along with a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in sculpture and a Master of Arts degree in studio art and painting, she holds an interdisciplinary PhD in art history and religious studies. Dr. Lee is an assistant professor in fine art and director of the Campanella Gallery at Park University in Parkville, Missouri. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Dr. Lee.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And thank you to all of you for joining this evening. I appreciate you. I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to sharing some time together. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slides here. I think. Sorry about this. I promise everyone, Cheryl and I did a run through. Everything was just working perfectly when we started. You know how technology is. So I appreciate your understanding here as we get this going. Okay, here we go. Can everyone see my screen? Okay, thank you. Thanks for the thumbs up. So to begin with tonight, I really want to thank Cheryl at the Mid-Continent Library, as well as the wonderful staff and librarians. And I also want to thank all of you, not only for coming out this evening, but also supporting our local libraries, as we, I think, can all agree that they are very important. And so thank you for that. So my presentation this evening will look at women artists. We're going to start with some foundational artists who were working at the beginning, early parts of the 20th century, and then move on to some later art movements and developments, focusing, of course, on women artists, especially in the art movements of photorealism, feminist art, activist art in the civil rights era, and also a movement called the pattern and decoration movement. As we'll see, the later 20th century women artists, some of them really created art in order to challenge stereotypes of women in American culture, including Black women and their experiences. So we'll have about 45 minutes of slides, and then leave about 15 minutes or so for questions, sharing, conversation, and those things. Apologies in advance. My students can attest that I tend to talk a lot, so I set myself an alarm. So if that goes off, then my apologies. So regarding the artwork, some of the artwork, especially later, is intended to be provocative in the sense and challenging. And so I just want to give kind of a trigger warning that some of the images can be challenging and in some ways perhaps uncomfortable for viewers. So I just want to put that out there right at the beginning. So we're going to go ahead and start with some artists in the early part of the 20th century. This is a photograph of Georgia O'Keeffe, who was probably one of the best known American painters, as well as female painters, women painters. She was a very imaginative child. She knew from a very early age that she wanted to be an artist. She studied art at the Art Institute of Chicago. Excuse me. Before her 30th birthday, she actually destroyed a lot of her artwork, and she vowed to paint only what was, quote, in my head. So very early on, we see a woman artist who's just very determined to, paint, in this case, what she wanted to, and to determine her own direction in art. So she sent some of her drawings to a friend in New York who shared them with a well-known photographer as well as gallery owner, who gave Georgia O'Keeffe her first solo exhibit. And so O'Keeffe quit her teaching job to devote herself for a full-time career in art. And while she was in New York, she created works like this that were very, very biomorphic, very fluid. She also created works like this that were a series called flower paintings or images of flowers. Now, O'Keeffe did not intend for them to be interpreted as being sexual or anything like that. However, critics and viewers saw these flower paintings as analogous or suggestive of female body parts. And so O'Keeffe really rejected and denied these readings of her work. After that criticism, she actually shifted her subjects to things like the cityscapes that she saw. She's still in New York at this time. Another one of her work from this period of a city. And so she really rejected these sexualized readings of her work. Probably you may know that if you know anything about O'Keeffe, you may know that she had a love and fascination with the American Southwest. She visited there frequently while she was living in New York. And eventually, after her husband, the photographer and gallery owner Alfred Stieglitz, passed away, she moved to New Mexico. And there she drew on images and excuse me, subjects of the American Southwest. This is one of her landscapes. By the time she passed away in 1986, she had risen to stardom in the art world as well as in the American public. And she said this about being both a painter and a woman artist. She said that everyone thought of her as the best, quote, woman painter, but she wanted to be one of the best painters. In other words, although she was a woman and an artist, obviously, she didn't want to be categorized as a woman artist or as a female artist. We'll see this shift later in the 20th century as some women artists really want to embrace some of the identity of being both a female artist, but also some of the subject matter that was foreshadowed by O'Keeffe. The Harlem Renaissance, as you may know, was an important cultural movement in America. It occurred in the cultural enclave of Harlem in New York City, and there were a number of African-American artists, writers, painters, musicians who were really celebrating and focusing in their subjects on the Black experience. So what does it mean to be, at this time, an African-American? And expressions of culture. So one of the women artists of the Harlem Renaissance was Louise Mailou Jones. And she actually studied art in Europe because she felt she would encounter a lot less prejudice in Europe, which was no doubt true. But she did works like this that had incorporated images of African masks. So at this time period in art, some European artists, most notably Pablo Picasso, who you probably may have heard of, Picasso was using African masks in his paintings. This was very shocking at the time. But in the case of Mailou Jones, she was using African masks and African imagery as a way to celebrate her heritage and also her cultural identity. So we'll see in some of the um, later works of the artists in the civil rights era, this idea of identity and cultural expression is important for some of the women. An early photographer who is quite well known, well, at least her many of her images are well known, was Dorothea Lange. Probably many of you have seen this particular image. It's in a lot of places. It's all over the internet. But Dorothea Lange was a woman photographer who, during the Depression, basically a little bit of context here. During the Depression, the federal government created programs, including the Public Works of Art project, and Lang herself worked for a program called the Farm Security Administration. And this is basically where the federal government hired artists and photographers to create work, or in the case of photographers, to document aspects of American experience. And so that's what Dorothea Lange did. And in this image, she documented this woman who was a pea picker. So she was a migrant, went out to California. She, the woman in the photograph, in order to improve the condition of her life. Believe it or not, the woman, as I understand it, in the photograph was only about 30 years old, as I recall. But it shows the experience of poverty and this idea of telling women's stories. Dorothea Lange didn't just photograph women, of course. She photographed men and farmers and lots of other people. But this idea of showing women's stories is part of Lange's work. This is another photograph also by Dorothea Lange. And there's actually a tie to our area. So in this photograph, she's showing this woman with her child at the side of the road, and this woman is from a family of 5 who were from Missouri, who went out to California. You may know, as part of this era in history, there was a great migration out to California from places like Oklahoma, Texas, the Midwest, as part of the Dust Bowl, so that people were looking for better opportunities out in California. And so it's with this intention that Lange documents this woman's experience. And if you look at the title here, it just kind of sums it up: broke, baby sick, and car trouble, exclamation point. This next slide actually shows Lange herself. So this is a picture that was taken by her assistant in this old 1930s Ford car. So, and she's holding her her photography equipment up there. Now, after World War II, women artists did continue to work. A lot of the art movements, or the main art movement after World War II, was with a group of predominantly male artists located in New York. So this is a time when Europe is basically devastated. In the U.S., we have generally, a more growing economy and things like that. So it's in that context then that this movement called abstract expressionism develops. And again, it's primarily a movement of mostly male artists. The exception being Lee Krasner, who is shown here in front of one of her paintings. She was an abstract expressionist painter. These artists worked in really large scale, and Lee Krasner herself did too. She did have some, I would say, well, during this time, she actually had very limited success with her artwork because, frankly, a lot of her success as an artist was overshadowed by.
Dr. Lee, I hate to interrupt, but your
Please.
audio seems to be cutting in and out just a little bit. I don't know.
Oh,
I don't
sorry.
see. I don't nearly know what could be causing that. But maybe I mean, it just kind of gets like, it sounds like you're talking through a tunnel and then it'll come back to normal. And I don't know if there's
Yeah.
anything we can do about it.
Okay. Thank you for the heads up,
Okay,
Cheryl.
now it's perfect, but
I adjusted my volume. Is that a little better?
it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you for letting me know. I'm not seeing any, pop-ups that saying your internet is unstable or anything like that. So
Yeah, okay,
fingers crossed. We know how this is with the technology. So apologies,
exactly.
apologies to
We'll
everyone.
cross our fingers. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So Lee Krasner was part of the abstract expressionists group. Let me see if I can hopefully get to that same slide here, and hopefully, Cheryl, just flag me down if it goes out again, but hopefully we'll be okay with the technology.
I had one person just throw out something. Are you wearing a lapel mic by any chance?
No, I'm not.
No. Okay. That's okay. Never mind.
Maybe I should be, but I don't have one, and I don't want to interrupt the presentation to go and sorry
We'll be
about
good.
that.
Yeah. Mhm.
No, thanks for that information. So Lee Krasner's career was actually overshadowed by her far more famous husband, Jackson Pollock, who was a very well-known abstract expressionist. He was the artist who did like these really drip paintings. I'll show you a picture in just a few slides of him and his artwork. But at any rate, she rather put her career on hold in order to support his career. Again, he was much more famous. However, Lee Krasner is, getting a lot more attention um, and a recognition for being the amazing artist that many people think that she was. She did things like in this work, she took elements of literally canvases that both she and Pollock, her husband Jackson Pollock, had worked on, and then she recreated them into her own compositions. And I'll just go through kind of a few more slides showing you these really expressionistic works that Lee Krasner did. Now, in the text here, this talks about what I just said. Basically, that her career was overshadowed by Jackson Pollock's until really after he died in a car accident. Some other works by Krasner, just really large scale, very expressive. Now, Krasner understood, I think, her not her own limitations, but the limitations that she had as a woman artist. So, for example, she was no doubt aware of how her husband's career kind of overshadowed their artistic lives. But also, one of the things that Lee Krasner did is that her name actually was not originally Lee; it was Lenore. And she changed her name to a more gender neutral Lee, Lee, so that she could hopefully experience less bias as a woman. And she thought it would help her career to change her name to Lee, a more gender neutral name. Uh, Lee Krasner studied with a well-known artist named Hans Hofmann. And Hoffman said of Lee's work, and I'm going to read this direct quote because I think it shows the well, it says a lot about how women artists were received and perceived during this time. And Hans Hofmann said of Lee Krasner's work, quote, "This is so good. This is so good, you'd never know it was made by a woman," end quote. Quite telling, I think. Um, And then this is the last work by that I have by Lee Krasner. Not the last work she did, but the one that I have. And then this final photograph of Lee Krasner, the woman standing to the right of your screen, and her husband Jackson Pollock, um, whose work is shown down here below. He was known for these really large scale drip paintings where he was flinging paints and so forth. He was on the cover of Life magazine. Um, but Lee Krasner is getting her own level of recognition. So that's just to put these artists in the context of some of the challenges that women artists faced. It's not that there weren't women artists. It's not that they weren't, successful in their own ways, but there were certainly challenges due to basically due to their gender. Now, when we get to the latter part um, of the 20th century, we see a lot of activist artists, especially with feminist art and also artists who are involved with the civil rights movement. So Black artists who are exploring different content, different subject matter, really wanting to push the political envelope and to really challenge viewers to think about things in our culture, in American culture. So we'll start with some of the feminist artists during the 1970s. Probably one of the best known feminist artists is Judy Chicago, who's shown here in I don't have the date for this photograph, but probably in the 1970s. That's when she became really active as an artist. She actually founded a feminist art program out in California, along with Miriam Schapiro. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide, which shows a really fundamental work that Judy Chicago created. It's called The Dinner Party, and it is an enormous, large scale installation. So what it is it's a triangular shaped table, 3 sides you see, and each of those sides is 48 feet long. So we can just sort of imagine the scale of it. And I'm not sure if you all can see my arrow or not, but hopefully you can. But if not, we can just kind of follow along a bit here. But along each of the sides are 39, or excuse me, not along each of the sides, but encompassing all 3 sides are a total of 39 place settings, which are devoted to different women in history, mythological women. This dinner party installation, sculpture, however we want to describe it, is a testimony and memorial to women's history and to women. In addition to the individual place settings, are in the center are these porcelain tiles, and on the porcelain tiles are written the names of 999 women. So women in history, again, mythological women, and so forth. So this really is a work that is about embracing women's history, or women in history specifically. Judy Chicago was the was the artist who created the idea, if you will, for the dinner party. But she worked with about 400 other artists and artisans, most of whom were women. And so there were women ceramicists who created the plates and the platters, some of the ceramic ware. She worked with women who worked with textiles, so needlework, and it was, again, working with women and also to celebrate what was hitherto underappreciated female art forms. So things like ceramics and textiles and embroidery. This next slide just kind of summarizes basically what I just shared about how this work was really intended to be a celebration of women in history. It was not without its controversy for a number of reasons. And excuse me, Chicago actually had difficulty finding a permanent home for the dinner party. It is now housed in a museum, but it took a long time to get there. This image shows just a few of the place settings. Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony. So again, these place settings that were in memorial in honor of these women in history. Now, unlike Georgia O'Keeffe, who really rejected any kind of uh, sexual interpretation of Georgia O'Keeffe's flower paintings, unlike her, Judy Chicago actually embraced that and was rather straightforward with the connotations of some of the imagery, and that was part of the controversy. Just another detail of the dinner project. Quite striking. And again, 48 feet long on each side. So we can just imagine the physical presence of such a large work. So yeah, Judy Chicago, along with another artist, Miriam Schapiro, who we'll see her work in some upcoming slides. Chicago and Schapiro founded the Feminist Art program out in California during the 1970s. And one of the projects that they did was called Woman House. And they basically, I don't want to say took over, but they found an old house that had basically been not quite abandoned, but quite dilapidated. And working with other artists, many of whom were their students, they created this woman house, which was designed to be about women's experiences. Judy Chicago had written about being she described it as a token artist or a woman token artist in the art world. And so she and Shapiro wanted to create a space that was specifically about women's experience. And through the structure of this woman house, they and the other artists redesigned a number of the rooms. The rooms had different themes. I'm just going to show you one portion of Woman House, and that is the linen closet, where this woman, or it's not actually a woman, but this mannequin in the shape of a woman, obviously, is emerging, if you will, or perhaps trapped, depending on your interpretation, from this linen closet. And so it's this idea of women's experience with domesticity and also the subject matter in art being about women's experiences. This was really new to the art world and very innovative, and also for some audiences, pretty upsetting too, because some of the work was confrontational. And this is a somewhat newer photograph of the artist. I didn't have the date for that, but that's more of what she looks like now. I think it's fun and sometimes interesting to show pictures of the artists themselves. These next few slides, with apologies in advance, I'm going to move through a little bit quickly because I ended up having quite a bit more material than our time will allow for this evening, but some women artists, as part of performance, used their own bodies. In this case, I will stop here at Hannah Wilke's very, very poignant and difficult, in this case, perhaps difficult work to look at. Wilke was a photographer who explored ideas of gender and women's experience uh, through photographs of herself. So she documented herself through her photography, including the experience that she had as she was dying of cancer. And so we see here this woman who is, presenting herself in this very unflinching, very real experience of, the whole cycle of life and death, and as part of her own story. I'm just going to kind of move through the other works from the artists who used their own body, but it's the idea that women were using their own experiences, but also their own bodies as part of the medium of art. So Judy Chicago and Miriam Schapiro were some of the early feminist artists, and we see other feminist artists, including this group called the Guerrilla Girls. And the Guerrilla Girls were founded, a group of artists and art professionals, all women, founded in the mid-1980s, I think 1985. And as you can see here, this is a group of the artists. Can you see what they're wearing? Right, gorilla masks. They're very tongue-in-cheek, want to be very controversial. They call themselves the, quote, conscience of the art world, because they want to draw attention to issues of race and gender and discrimination, both in the art world as in, for example, like in the representation in museums and galleries, for example, but also in the larger culture. So their focus and goal is to call attention to these issues. Now, there are a few reasons that they wear the gorilla masks. Number one, as they claim, is that they really want audiences to focus on the issues that they are trying to address or call attention to. But the second reason is, or another reason at least, is that they also don't want to have backlash against them and their own careers for bringing forth these issues against museums or other institutions in culture. And of course, the gorilla masks is a play and a pun on the term gorilla, as it's spelled down below. So what do the Guerrilla Girls do? They have these ad campaigns, they make posters, billboards and things like that. These are just a few examples of some of the ones that they've done. Again, they're very tongue-in-cheek, want to be confrontational, want to be funny, but also, be a little bit poking and prodding about the issue. So this one, the advantages of being a woman artist, including things like not having to undergo the embarrassment of being called a genius, working without the pressure of success. You get the idea. It's very tongue-in-cheek, but very pointed, very intentional in what they are trying to call the issues to. So this is another one. When racism and sexism are no longer fashionable, what will your art collection be worth? And they go on to explain or to say that, you know, for the 17 point some million dollars that you just spent on a single work by Jasper Johns, a well-known mid-century male artist, you could have bought one of the works from all of the following artists who are women. And I just saw before the presentation this evening that it includes some of the women that we just looked at, Georgia O'Keeffe and Dorothea Lange, and certainly a lot of others. They're wanting to call attention, of course, to the idea that you know, women artists aren't, you know, they're not being valued in the same way that some of the male artists are as well. I didn't have a picture of a work that I do want to mention about the Guerrilla Girls for a few reasons. I wanted to keep the presentation family friendly, and even though this is a group of, you know, adults and the presentation is for adults, I didn't know if any little kids might be Zoom bombing or anything, so I wanted to be a little bit mindful of that. The Guerrilla Girls did another poster campaign, ad campaign, and they asked, and this is a quote, "Do women have to be naked to get into the Metropolitan Museum? Less than 5% of artists are women, but 85% of the nudes are female." So on this poster, which again, I'm not going to show, it shows a reclining, you know, a reclining woman who's wearing a gorilla mask rather. And it was, the poster campaign was not well received. And although the image that they used was actually drawing upon a work from an earlier century by a well-known French artist of a reclining nude. So the Guerrilla Girls are definitely a strong group of strong women who are really out there about wanting to express their feminist ideas. Another feminist artist a little bit later in this century is Janine Antoni. And her work, at least in this case, kind of combines conceptual art in the sense that it's challenging viewers to think about things and these ideas, but also performance. And so in this work, what she did was she created these enormous cubes of, in the foreground, chocolate and also lard, animal fat, right? And as part of the performance that she did for this exhibit, she literally gnawed and ate and chewed at these enormous blocks of chocolate. Now, that may seem, you know, pretty outside of, you know, mainstream. It's like, what's going on here? What is this artist doing? Well, what is she trying to make us think about? One of the things that she wanted to do in this performance with this was to basically make a commentary about the extreme measures, for instance, like bulimia, and so forth, that women take in our culture because of this pressure that many women have and feel in order to adhere to these ideals of beauty. And so again, the extreme measures and what that experience is like. She actually literally made herself sick um, with the consumption of this chocolate. And again, it's she's wanting to call attention to what our culture does, and the pressures on women. This is just a detail of that enormous block of chocolate, cube of chocolate, I guess is how it's described. So, a number of women artists are interested in cultural expressions, cultural issues, both in the 1960s and 70s and beyond. And so, depending on the artist, they may explore different topics, including their own experience, the larger experience of women, and also their political beliefs and also identity. So Judy Baca is a Latin American artist, and she created, I'm just going to show this one image of hers. She created this really large scale mural. It's almost a half mile long in out in California, and so she's drawing on this tradition in Mexican art, Mexican muralists, specifically like Diego Rivera, if you've ever heard of that artist. But at any rate, she wanted to, this slide shows a little bit longer stretch of that mural. But she wanted to, document this experience of California, Los Angeles, and so forth. And then I don't know if you can see my arrow or not. If not, I'm moving towards the to the left of the mural that shows the woman with her children, right? And if you see below, it says the Dust Bowl refugees. So we've already seen precedents with this, with Dorothea Lange, who Lange, through photography, documented this experience of this family, this woman and her children going to California as part of the migration from the Dust Bowl, in order to hopefully have a better life, or at least, that's what they wanted. That's what they were aspiring to. So that's some of what Judy Baca does. Again, she's a Latin American artist. There are a number of African American artists who also really want to express their cultural experiences, their experience as women, their experience as Black women, to celebrate that, to also, in some cases, to really criticize aspects of culture that, for example, racism and so forth. And so Faith Ringgold, and I understand from Cheryl that there was a previous presentation at the library about Faith Ringgold. I don't know if any of you saw that. I hope you did. I unfortunately missed it, but she's a very well-known, not just a well-known artist, but just really really pivotal and just an important artist of the late the late 20th century, an activist artist. She considers herself a feminist, and was really important as part of the civil rights era, and used her artwork to explore ideas of women's experience, Black women's experience. She used textiles and quilts. She calls the works that are behind her, and in the next few slides, story quilts, because she's wanting to tell the story and the experience of what it means to be a Black girl or a Black woman in culture. There was also a very practical element to her using quilt making as a tradition. Not only was she drawing on this more traditional female expression or artistic expression, i.e. quilts, but the practical element too. I learned about her and hearing her speak one time was that they were easier to ship than large scale paintings and so forth. But that's really an aside, because her work really is about, in works like this, about the experience of being a Black woman. They aren't necessarily autobiographical, but rather, you know, these stories that she tells um, about women and their experiences. And this is another of her Astoria quilts, the title of which is like front and center in that quilt. Who's afraid of Aunt Jemima? Well, you probably know that Aunt Jemima is this figure in American culture, a long history there. Aunt Jemima has also been interpreted as a very pejorative figure for um, as a stereotype of Black women. And so Ringgold is really wanting to challenge that. And she's not the only one. She's not the only Black woman artist who wants to do that. The next artist, Betye Saar, is also really about, well, at least her earlier works like this were really about challenging racism and racial stereotypes in American culture. So this work is it's a mixed media work. For those of who may not have a background in art, mixed media refers to when artists combine different materials. In this case, actual objects. There might be, you know, the hand down below is painted and so forth. So mixed media refers to combining different materials. In this mixed media work, called The Liberation of Aunt Jemima, Betye Saar takes this very pejorative, negative stereotype of Black women, Aunt Jemima, with connotations of, you know, the servitude of Black women, domesticity of Black women, and so forth. And her intention is to really reclaim the image and to basically turn it upside down in the sense that we do have this, she uses this stereotype or this image of this stereotype, right, of Aunt Jemima, this domestic figure in American culture, on pancake syrup bottles and so forth. In Aunt Jemima's hand, Saar has placed a broom in this hand, and then in this other hand, then, she has a gun. I initially thought it was a shotgun. That's what I had read in the literature. One of my military students, Park University, where I teach, has a lot of military students, and one of my military students said, "Dr. Lee, that's a rifle." So, at any rate, we know that we know that it's a weapon. And in this, in this work, Betye Saar is wanting to reclaim this image and to challenge the viewers and to, you know, to show that Aunt Jemima is this woman who can yield a very dangerous weapon, to claim it for herself. And in the center, in the foreground, there's not a lot of depth there, but at any rate, this fist, this clenched fist, was a symbol of part of the Black Power movement. And so Saar is using that intentionally. So here we see a woman artist, a Black woman artist, who's really wanting to challenge things in culture, stereotypes, and so forth. Works like this, also done by Betye Saar, are perhaps less in-your-face confrontational, but nonetheless she wants to present different perspectives of race and gender through her art. So in this, again, mixed media assemblage, Saar has combined this photograph of this woman and her child, along with in the upper, let's see, the upper left-hand side of the artwork, as well as your screen, this image of this Black Madonna and child. You may or may not know that in Western art history, so in European art history, there are images. They're not prevalent, but there are images both in painting and in sculpture. So like using black marble, for example, in different cathedrals and in Europe, there are images of Mary, the mother of Jesus, depicted as being very dark-skinned. And so Saar is connecting these more religious images that are sacred images in history for many people, these sacred images with the experience of this probably more ordinary woman, this human. And so we saw in the earlier work that Saar really wants to confront these stereotypes of pejorative images of women. But in this case, she's also wanting to present more beautiful, more positive images of Black women for Black women. So that's part of what she does. She also explores, oh my goodness. I apologize. I just saw my clock. My alarm did not go off. Cheryl, can I interrupt and ask, how are we for time? Where are we?
It is 7:53 right now. So we've got a few more minutes.
Okay. With apologies to the audience, my students can tell me, oh, Dr. Lee is so excited about art and she just talks and talks and talks. I did set an alarm and it didn't go off. So I apologize. I want to allow time for questions and also for your responses for any of you who would like to share. So I'm just going to move through some of the other slides. We didn't get to the photorealist artist, Audrey Flack, who explored ideas of femininity and this genre in art history called vanitas, this idea that beauty is fleeting. It's supposed to be like a message for women, don't get caught up in things like, makeup and beauty and things like that, because time passes and this too shall pass. The pattern and decoration movement was founded by Miriam Schapiro, the co-founder of the Feminist Art movement. And this was a movement that really celebrated traditional female handiwork and textiles like fabric. So it was about the beauty of the fabric and those sorts of things. I do apologize that we can't get through all of these slides. I'll just go ahead and flip through them quickly for the benefit of hopefully the recording. My email is alee@park.edu if anyone needs to follow up about some of these questions or anything. But with that, I'll go ahead and stop share. I can see that there's some things in the chat. And so why don't is it okay, Cheryl, if we go ahead and open it up for questions?
Yeah, okay.
I want to be respectful of people's time.
Okay. We had a question. I believe this was about the dinner party piece of art. What is in the middle of the table? Is it water?
Oh, so in the very center of that triangle, it looked I can understand why you might think it was water because it was very reflective. It was actually ceramic, so it was porcelain, and it was very shiny, which gave it that reflective look. And that's where the names were written, the 999 names.
Okay, and then if that is a real block of chocolate, where did she get it and how much did it weigh?
Oh, that's a great question, Ellen. So it weighed about 600 pounds. Can you imagine? And I believe that I don't think she got it. I think that she probably worked with folks who could help her make it and create it. I've never heard of being able to go and buy a 600-pound block of chocolate, but yes, it was real chocolate.
Okay, in the Madonna multimedia piece, what was the meaning of the hand
Oh,
with the key?
oh, great question, Michael. So the hand for Saar represents, it's basically a helping hand. It's a reference in a number of other African American art forms of a mojo, so the helping hand. And for Saar, the hand especially has important meaning. I have been very curious myself about the meaning for Saar of the key because it's a recurrent uh, emblem in a number of her works. I don't know for her the meaning of the key, but I do think that it is significant.
Okay,
Thank
and
you for that great question.
we did have one person request a part two, and I am more than open to do that. I don't make that call though. I will share your request with our programming librarian, but we do plan about 9 months out. So it might be a little while before we can do a part two. And that's if Dr. Lee has time. Okay, let's see. Did, okay, did the
So
Gorilla Girls ever appear without the mask in artwork pieces or public engagements? Okay.
not to my knowledge. I actually met them and heard them speak, and they were consistently true to form. They always had those masks on. As far as I know, that's their that's how they do it. Again, they really want to, hide their identity, to call attention to the issues, but also they don't want to be, have backlash against that. And so, thank you, R. Bernie, for your very kind comments. Yeah, it's a program on Alison Saar and her sculpture. Oh, for the 24 Olympics in Paris. Great idea. Thank you.
I
And
wrote that down on a Post-it here.
yes. For the record, thank you also for your suggestion, Ellen, of maybe a part two. I would love to do that. You may be able to tell that I'm quite passionate about the subject. Didn't even get through all of my slides, and I apologize to all of you for that. So
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of material out there to cover. So,
indeed.
okay. Okay. Any other questions tonight? Okay, I should have put uh, my last survey in there. I did put a link to our survey. If you want, if you all take the link, we'd
If it was,
appreciate it.
I
Yeah.
know that can be frustrating.
Okay, I think that's all we have tonight. This was very interesting. I really appreciated your time and your insights. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Dr. Lee. And I may be reaching out to you about a program in 9 months or so. Okay,
Absolutely. Yes.
okay.
And thank you all for joining, for spending time together this evening. And do all please be safe and warm in this upcoming snow event. If you are anywhere in the metro, um, so be safe in your
Okay.
travels. Thank you
Good,
and good
good
night.
night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight.